Good evening, everyone. My name is Celeste La Cabra. Welcome back to my channel. Alright, it's time for another episode of Cinema Sepulcher, the series where I scour my Blu-ray collection for 3 unwatched films and discuss them, in hopes of salvaging them from rotting on the shelf like a fetid corpse in a forgotten tomb. So some brief housekeeping before we get started. I'm aware that this episode is a few weeks late, but life kept getting in the way. Other things took priority and this kept taking the back burner. And this was going to be delayed yet another week because I'm going to Riot Fest in Chicago this week, but I'm shooting this video early and I'll have it uploaded and ready to become public Friday. So it'd be like I never left. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So the first film I want to discuss today is from 1947. It's the original version of Nightmare Alley. This is the Criterion edition here. There's that. And there's the inside. You know, a lot of people didn't buy this when it first came out because they heard rattling and they thought there was a loose disc, but no, it was these lovely collectible tarot cards. They all have this design on the back, which, if you've seen the film, is, you know, highly relevant to both the plot and the themes of the film. So essentially in this one, Tyrone Power plays a character named Stanton Carlyle, and essentially he finds himself working as a carny at the carnival, essentially. And he starts making friends and starts trying to learn their secrets, and he kind of discovers that he's actually very talented at this, which he seems to intuitively understand boils down to deception when you're talking about like magic tricks and spiritualism and working the crowd and this, that, and the other. Now this is something that is, you know, probably okay when we're talking about a circus context or a carnival where people know what they're getting into and they kind of want to be fooled because that's all part of the fun. And, you know, their idea of reality goes back to normal when they leave. But what Carlyle realizes pretty soon in the film is that the skills that he's acquired in the carnival can be applied to real life. And he starts engaging in deceptive spiritualism that is a lot more dangerous to people. And he essentially takes the principles of deception that he learned in the carnival and starts applying it to practices outside of the carnival in a way that's very dangerous and ends up hurting people. To me, this film is a really kind of bold and scathing indictment of like hucksters and pseudoscientists, spiritualists, etc. It honestly almost goes as far as to make the obvious connection to religion writ large and the ways that that kind of deceives and hoodwinks people, and makes it more difficult for them to parse reality from fiction. Doesn't quite get there because, you know, this is the 1940s and we can't quite get away with calling out American Christianity or anything like that, but unfortunately, I think this film is just as relevant and as prescient today as it was in the 40s. I don't think there's any shortage of con men out there using very basic psychological tricks and their kind of personal charm to deceive their way into wealth and to sell a version of reality that just isn't true or doesn't exist. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a host of various pseudoscientists that this film is really calling out. Ones that are as old as time and ones that are, you know, specifically bred and honed for the current year. So yeah, I think the film is about more than just one man's kind of Icarus fable, or a moral tale against playing God or something like that. I think it does have pretty strong political implications for various genres of bullshitters that still make a killing today. It's a film noir, so the morality is certainly not 100% black and white. It's kind of the thing that the genre makes its bread and butter out of, you know. A lot of the characters are morally gray and have understandable intentions, even if they act in despicable ways. And that includes our main character. Like, I think he's able to squint and look at what he's doing as helping others, as rational, or as ethical. And I think that many people today end up using the same line of reasoning for their despicable, deceptive practices. The character of Lilith, the psychologist, is one of my favorite characters in the film, and is one that I think just has so many layers to her characters, and especially the performance that is given is just so good and so subtle and just so effective at portraying all these shades of gray in her character. I'm having a little bit of trouble discussing this because I watched Guillermo del Toro's remake right after it, and the two are kind of blending in my mind because they are very similar. The main difference is the ending. This one has a ending that is safer for, well, it was mandated by the studios essentially, and then Guillermo kind of went back and ended it the way it was supposed to be. But overall, I think that this film is better. I think it's more subtle. I think it's less obvious, and I think the performances are better across the board as well. So I gave this one an 8 out of 10. I really loved it, and I highly recommend it. I recommend seeking it out. It's pretty hard to find outside of this lovely Criterion edition, but it looks amazing, and the supplements are fantastic, so I highly recommend picking this up if you're interested. In terms of the supplements, there is an interview with Imogen Sarah Smith, and her interview is just fantastic. She gives such a great analysis of the material and such good context to the making of the film and the state of the studio system and of the actors. It's just a really enlightening, just great interview. She's always good, so definitely check that one out. There's also an interview with Todd Robbins, who is actually like a historian of sorts of carnivals and of freak shows and sideshows. He gives such a good interview too. It's just completely fascinating, and he explores the source novel and how it relates to this film adaptation and how all of that relates to real life. So definitely don't skip that one if you have this edition. And then there's a couple interviews with one of the actresses and with a different director talking about Tyrone Powers, and those are good as well. The next film I wanted to discuss is Brian De Palma's Obsession, and this is the edition from Arrow Video. This is an older Arrow title, I think, because there was a lot of like ads at the beginning. There's just a lot of annoying stuff at the beginning that you couldn't skip. It doesn't go right into their logo and then the menu screen like all the other ones I've seen do. So I guess this is an older one, but yeah. I have the Region B release. There's the inside disc, and there's a reversible cover art, which is cool. So it's impossible to talk about this film without discussing Vertigo, because it is almost a soft remake of sorts. And Brian De Palma and Paul Schrader are not shy about saying that. In the supplements, it even says that they saw the film in theaters and were so inspired that they decided to go ahead and write this screenplay. So a lot of people would say that they're ripping off Vertigo. I don't think that's true because they're very forward about their influences, and I actually like the idea of just taking the basic premise of something but not actually remaking it, because in remakes a lot of the time there's a lot of pressure to live up to the original or to follow all the same beats, and you know, inevitably it's going to be compared and living in the shadow of that original. But I like the idea of just taking the premise of something but making your own film out of it, so that it definitely recalls the original film, but you're not beholden to it. And this definitely plays out quite a bit differently than Vertigo does, and it's not the same story. It's just kind of the same premise. I'm not really going to talk too much about the plot, to be honest, because it's really difficult to do that without spoiling it. There's twists and turns and all sorts of zany shit that happens in it, and I don't want to ruin any of it for you, so I won't. But I will say that the score from Bernard Herrmann, who did the score for Vertigo, which is really cool, is excellent. It's one of his last scores that he ever did. In the supplements, I talk about how he said he couldn't even remember writing it after viewing the film, and that he was just crying. It's a really sad story. The cinematography is something I want to talk about as well. If you own this Blu-ray or if you've seen the film, you might think that the quality is not very good, but the image is just so soft, and it's that way on purpose. Like it all feels very hazy and very dreamlike, and I think that is clearly intentional. Yeah, so the cinematography I actually really like, despite it's got a unique visual style, and it doesn't have those bold colors or that like striking imagery that I think a lot of people look for in films and on Blu-ray transfers, but I really dug it, actually. And just the things that De Palma and his DP do with cameras, you know, camera tricks and deep focus. And there's this one shot that I really love where it's just two people talking from across the table, and the camera pans, and the focus just kind of goes in and out depending on what we're looking at, and it just kind of goes to one character as he's speaking and focuses, and then it kind of blurs out a bit, and you kind of see the background of the restaurant that they're at, or the you know, through the window you see the city. It just kind of goes in and out. It's very smooth movement. There's also a crazy shot in the final scene that just kind of spins and spins and spins, and I don't really know how they did it or how the cinematographer didn't like throw up doing this shit, but like, yeah, I don't know. I think the performances in this are all good. I really love the set locations, these beautiful like Italian churches and cemeteries and stuff. And it's just a really good, gripping story too. I really love this one. Brian De Palma is a director that I really admire and whose work really doesn't ever miss for me. Yeah, in terms of Obsession, I highly recommend it. I'm sorry I kept it so vague, but again, the story is just something that I think is best experienced blind. Now, in terms of the supplements, there's a little documentary called Obsession Revisited, where I got a lot of the information that I'm talking about here, about the making of it and the legacy of it, and just looking back on it and everything. That's directed by, I forget how to pronounce his name. It's Laurent Bozero or something like that. He does like all of the good, making of documentaries. And then there's actually 2 early Brian De Palma short films on here, which I will discuss briefly. The first one is called Wotan's Wake. It's from 1962. It's a student film, and I believe it's the earliest surviving film of Brian De Palma's you can watch. It's really bizarre, and nothing really happens, and it's not that good, but it's certainly a curiosity and something to check off the list if you're trying to complete his filmography. It's just kind of got this weird, I don't know, it's a really low resolution black and white image of like this kind of really fucked up character that like does a prosthetic face or something and like tries to get women, and then it kind of ends with a bunch of parodies of classic films where she's like she's Death at the Seventh Seal and then he's King Kong. It's weird. I didn't care for it, but it's certainly there and it's an interesting curiosity. And then there's another short film called The Responsive Eye from 1966. This is a documentary short that he was commissioned to do at an art museum. They had some kind of art exhibition of like, I don't exactly remember what it's called. I kind of stopped paying attention, to be honest. It was really boring, but like, it's the same principle that fucking blue dress meme had, where people could not tell what color the dress was, where depending on the lighting and the shadows and this, that, and the other, it can appear as 2 different colors of 2 different people or all at once or something. But the thing is, it's in black and white. So like, you just see images that are black and white. Like, it doesn't work, Like, this is a documentary about art, specifically about the colors that this art is presenting, and it's in black and white. I know that's not his fault, but like, if it wasn't directed by De Palma, there'd be no reason to watch it. So, I mean, whatever, check it out, I guess, but I don't recommend it. But I do recommend the release very highly. I think the image looks excellent. I think it sounds really good, and I think the film is great. So, yes, check out Obsession for sure. Okay, the last film I'm going to discuss is Audition from Takashi Miike. This is, again, the Arrow Video edition. There is a Region A release of this, but I got the Region B, I think just because I threw it in a sale or something. But yeah, there's your inside. And there's your reversible. I do really like this image, this iconic image, but I like the artwork that Arrow commissioned because I just much prefer the color palette on this. I just love this. I think it looks great. So I have a lot to say about this one. It is certainly a bizarre film, and it's really great. But the way that it's made and the way that the story is told and the way that it's edited and shot, it is extremely ambiguous. And I've kind of spent a lot of time since I've watched it reading reviews and listening to like some of the podcasts I really like did episodes on it, and I listen to those. And what I find fascinating is that nobody has the same opinion of the film, and nobody can even seem to agree on the basic plot elements. I heard plot synopses from several different people where very crucial and like basic details were interpreted differently by different people. I don't know, when the film finished and I kind of thought about it, I thought I had a pretty solid interpretation of what happened and what it means. But both my partners had different interpretations, and every single person I've listened to or read about afterwards had a different interpretation as well. There's definitely elements that overlap where people are picking up on similar themes, and there's a kind of basic, not even really, like people don't really seem to be able to agree on what happened, So I feel pretty confident in my interpretation, but I've since discovered that Takashi Miike has said that my interpretation is wrong. So take that for what you will, but I'm not going to say that anybody's interpretation is right. It's just kind of what makes sense to you, or what you get out of it, because really, I mean, everybody has a different interpretation. He seems to have really succeeded in the ambiguity that he was going for. Now, I know there's debate as to whether or not this is a feminist film. I tend to think that it is. That's how I read it. There's a really interesting interview with a Japanese film historian on this who kind of specializes in Miike's films. And he kind of dismisses this question because he says that feminism, as we understand it in the West, just doesn't exist in Japan, and especially didn't exist in 1999. Plus, Takashi Miike himself has said that the film is not feminist. He had some pretty alarming things to say about the state of how women are treated over in Japan. It's not something that I know a lot about, but it sounded pretty grim, and now I kind of want to look more into it to learn more about like women's rights and feminism over in Japan. In the interview, he also, or in the little video essay or whatever, he also said that Takashi Miike said that some of the vomit in the film, you'll know what scene I'm talking about if you've seen it, is real, and he just straight up said, I don't believe him. That's kind of how I feel about a lot of the things he's saying about this film. I think he is intentionally like a shit stirrer and a bit of an edgelord, and I don't know, he wants to like rustle feathers, and when people have kind of settled on an interpretation, he's like, no, that's not right. You know? I don't know. That's just my take on it. But the film is just, I think, a really interesting... now again, take this with a grain of salt because everybody has a different interpretation, but here's mine. The film to me is a really interesting exploration into the ways that women are forced to audition for men as potential candidates for a relationship. He falls in love with this woman because she's like the perfect little meek housewife and whatever, and becomes obsessed with her because of those attributes that he gives to her, or assumes that she has, because that's what she told him in a literal audition that they hold. But like, at the end of the day, it's all a performance and it's not who she really is. To me, the film is all about male paranoia. I think a lot of the things we see are not things that actually happen, and it's really just about how terrified men are of women and how like insecure they are about their relationships to women and what women could do to them. All right, so here we go. Like, from here on, I'm going to spoil it. I can't talk about this film without spoiling it. And I really want to know if you all agree with my interpretation or not, or if you have different ones. So please leave in the comments your interpretations of the film and what you think about mine. Let's talk about this. So I've kept the whole video spoiler-free up to here. So if you've not seen Audition, feel free to click ahead or skip ahead to my outro or whatever you need to do. It's cool, I get it. But 8 out of 10 for me. I actually gave the same thing to Obsession. I didn't say that earlier, but all three of these films were 8s for me. Just great stuff this week. And real quick before I go ahead and spoil this film for anybody who hasn't seen it, let me go ahead and tell you what we're talking about next week in case you want to do your homework. All right, so next time on Cinema Sepulcher, we'll be discussing Mothra. This is the Steelbook from Mill Creek. Okja from Bong Joon-ho in the Criterion Collection. And Madman from Arrow Video. So, that's your homework. Until next time, I bid you farewell. And if you want to stick around for the spoiler talk for Audition, here we go. Okay, so everything is kind of consistent until we get to the point where he wakes up after they have sex together and she's missing. And then he can't find her, and he finds all this depraved shit that she's apparently done. And then she tortures him almost to death, and then kind of almost kills his son because she wants to be the only person that he loves, including his own son. She makes him promise this, and of course it's just something people say, but she then takes it extremely literally. Now, as far as I understand it, the sequence of events is he falls asleep, okay? Then he wakes up and all this crazy shit happens. Then he wakes up again and he's next to her and everything is fine. Nothing like that has happened, and she's super sweet and everything again. Then he falls back asleep and he's back into the torture scene. And then they have like a heart-to-heart kind of talk as they're dying on the floor, and then the film ends. So to me, that suggests that all of this crazy torture shit is happening in his dreams. Now, Takashi Miike has said, no, that's not true. It's all really happening. But I don't see how that is possible with the film grammar being presented and the order of events that were being shown. Now, the counter-argument that would make the most sense to me to this interpretation of the film is essentially the scene where she is sitting in her apartment all alone, kind of waiting for this phone call and just like staring at the ground, looking like the fucking girl from The Ring or whatever. And then you see a man in a bag move because she's essentially kidnapped and tortured him. This would sort of suggest that it is really happening and not just in his head, because it's happening before he learns this stuff about her, and it happens outside of the dream sequence. You know, it seems the most likely to be actually happening in the narrative of the film. However, I think that at this point, it's still very clear to me that he is fully like imagining all these things about her, and a lot of the things that we see from her are things that are in his own head. Like the idea that like a girl would be sitting and waiting for your phone call for days doing nothing else is like such a peak like male narcissist fantasy that you'd be like, oh yeah, I bet she's just she has nothing better to do all day than to wait for me to call her, and like when I do, that's finally what like allows her to do anything else. You know, it's just kind of absurd, right? And he finds this girl who's like his perfect woman or whatever because she's so meek and shy and kind and, you know, this, that, and the other, but he kind of conjures this fantasy of her where she's actually like this superhuman, monstrous person who is going to like, who kidnaps people and tortures them in her house and feeds them vomit and like killed her previous abuser, like tortured him and cut his feet off, and is going to do the same thing to him. I think it is a critique of the way that patriarchal society objectifies women, but I also think it's more so a critique of the ways that men kind of create inaccurate fantasies about women, be it that they must be perfect. You know, it's like in the patriarchal fantasy, a woman either has to be like perfectly meek and docile and subservient to a man, or she's a fucking raging psycho. You know, like those are the options. And that to me is what I feel that this is portraying and critiquing. Takashi Miike would tell you something else, but to me, that is what is clear in the text of the film. But I understand that this is one that is very, very divisive and very, very ambiguous. So, like I said, drop your interpretations in the comments, please. And that's it for this time. Liking the video helps others find my channel, so that would be greatly appreciated. We're already getting pretty close to 200 subscribers, which is awesome. So let's help get us there. Join our gay little film club and hit subscribe. And again, please leave me lovely comments to read so that we can have a discussion. And yeah, look forward to another video soon. I can't guarantee a week because shit keeps happening, but I'll do my best. Yeah, until then, hail celluloid, hail cinema, and hail Satan.